So hello everyone, today we are going to talk about inputs and output in a Python programming language, right? So imagine you are asked to write a program that adds two numbers, right? So imagine you are asked to write a program that could add two numbers. Now one of the way that we can actually do it is just add 10. Another variable will declare which is maybe 20, and then we can just simply print out the statement a plus b, and as usual we are able to get this output 30, that is 10 plus 20 is 30. Fine, but at certain instances we will need to get an input from our user. That is, our user should provide us with the value, and then we'll take those value, and then whatever operation that we want to do with it, we can do it, right? So for getting data into our Python program, we have certain mechanisms to do that, right? At the same time, to display the data that has been operated upon by your Python program to the user, right? So we'll look into both of it. So input is pretty simple. So if I have to store a value, what I'm gonna and get this value from the user, what we are gonna do, we are gonna use the input method, right? Input method will be used, and within that we'll have a prompt. Now prompt is something that gets displayed to the user. Now imagine if I don't put a prompt, what will happen? We can see a box in here, right? There is a blinking cursor. Over here there is a blinking cursor, and we have a box where we can put values, whatever we want. But there is no mechanism to be sure that what is actually required, right? So imagine in that scenario, I can just put some sort of an information to the user. Like within this, because it's a string, so it has to be within inverted comma. So we'll write, enter your age, something of that sort, right? So let me re-execute it and let's see what happens. So now we in our prompt we have an information, we have a prompt to the user that enter your age, and after that we have our blinking cursor where we are gonna put it, right? So suppose I'm gonna put the age in here, right? And then we will execute it. So now if I just simply print the variable a, so let's see what it gives us, 30, right? Does it make sense? So this is how we are going to get information, get data from my user, right? We will use the input function, and within that we will prompt a message. This message will get displayed, and whatever value my user will enter will actually be assigned to the variable, right? Now the interesting thing is that, let me show you the type of a. It's str. That means every time whatever data your user is filling. Now in this case you see 30, which seems to be a number, but as we have taken through an input function, every kind of data that is received by an input function is string by default, but we have methods using which we can convert it to different data type, right? So over here we have talked about it. So there are certain data conversion function that can be applied on string, because input function returns the value in string format, so they can be converted into different data types. Like using an int function, I can convert it to an integer. Using a float function, I can convert it to a floating point. I can even convert to a list and eval. So we'll talk about list and eval because they are very much important. So now let me demonstrate how we can use int. So the problem with this code was that, you see, it's a string. It's not an integer, so we have to convert it to first. So what we are going to do, we are going to enclose our input function within int function. That means our input will get converted, right? So it's a shorter way of doing it, and I'll also put a colon so that it looks better, right? So if I execute, similar behavior, enter your age, and this time I'll put 30 again. So let us check. Yes. Now we are going to check the type of the variable a. Earlier it was string, right? Previously when we didn't use int function, it was string. So now if I execute it, it gives me an int, right? So that is how we can do it. We can even convert it to a float. Let's see. We'll convert it to a float. We'll execute it. Similar behavior, 30. We'll try and print. But this time we don't have 30, we have 30.0 because it's a floating point number, right? And again, if we check the type, it gives us float. So does it make sense? So that is how input function works, and that is how we can get data from our user. As simple as that. Now at certain times, it's not only discrete value, our user might want to enter a list, right? Enter a list to us. So that is also doable with input function. So if I want to get an input list from my user, maybe you need to sort it out, or maybe it consists a collection of data, something of that sort. So if I write input and I'll just give a message, enter a list, something of that sort, and if I do that, I'll just put everything in a comma separated function, right? And if I execute it, let us check our list, right? The problem is that it has not been converted to a list. It's just a string, right? A string where numbers are there and they are comma separated. So this is not going to work. So we are going to use our list function. This list function, where the example is also given, we're going to use it, and let's see what happens. List will again enclose input function within another function, list, and we'll execute. So again, it's going to ask me for entering the list. I'll try and do that. If I execute, fine, and then I'll execute list. Now we can see it's a list. Why? Because it has been enclosed within square brackets, and we can see all the characters, right? 1, 2, everything has been put inside inverted commas. That means yes, it is list, but it's not a list of numbers, it's a list of string. Does it make sense? So that is how it's behaving. So this is fine. At certain times you will just take you want to take a list of strings, then it's fine. But if you want to take a list of numbers, then this list function cannot help us exactly, though we can apply a for loop and then convert it down, but this is not an idea. We have another function called as an eval. We have another function which is called an eval. Now these two functions, list and eval, are very much important during different kind of sorting algorithm and what's or not. We do use these functions. Does it make sense? So we'll see eval in action. So I'll write something of int list, something of that sort, int list, which is equal to, again we'll write eval, which is a function, and within that we will just call for our input method. We'll prompt it again, enter a list of something. Okay, it has asked us, and then we'll execute it, and we'll see what our int list contains. And now we can see it's a collection of integers, but the thing is that it is tuple. But again, converting a tuple into a list, if you explicitly require a list, you see it's not that tough, it's very easy. Now we can apply list function on int list and it will get converted to list. But the interesting thing is that now everything is in number format, right? They're not string, they're not enclosed in double inverted comma. So does it make sense? So this was all about input. Different ways to take input, and it is very much important. At certain times you have to fetch data from your user, and using that data we have to work upon it, right? So these 4 functions, there are many more functions, so just look into the documentation and you'll get better hold of it. Okay, so again we are into our blog post, and then we'll talk about output in a Python program, right? So here we talked about different ways through which we can take an input. Now we are going to talk about output. So we have been using output in a way throughout all our demonstrations. We have been using print. So this is the time where we formally introduce print function. Print is a very simple function. Whatever you provide it within its argument gets printed. As simple as that, right? Multiple arguments can also be given to it. So now this is the general syntax of a print function. We have star object, which means variable length argument. That means I can put multiple values into. If I write something of that sort, print hello, which is a string, then I'm putting another 2, maybe 10, which is a number, and if I execute it, you can see everything is getting printed, hello to 10, right? So this was a string, this was also a string, and this was an integer. So we can put n number of arguments, and this is what object star means. When we will talk about function and function argument, star, then any particular parameter means variable length argument, right? So that means multiple arguments can be given. The next thing is separator. Separator by default is space. We see here I've written hello 2 and 10, but by default a space has been inserted in between them. Does it make sense? Because the separator by default is space. Here we can see by default it is a space. Now we can change it. If I change this argument, sep is equal to, maybe I want to put exclamation, something of that sort. Again, we have to put it inside inverted comma, else it's not going to work, it's going to throw an error, right? And if I execute it, so now we can see in place of space there is an exclamation point, right? Now we can change it to something else also, doesn't matter. I can change it to pound, and as we can see, the behavior is obtained. So this was another argument. The first argument is the object, that is variable length object. You can put as many arguments as you want. Then the separator is the character that gets printed between different objects that we are trying to print, right? And after that we have end. Now these three arguments, that is the list of the object, then the separator and end, they are the most widely used arguments. File and flush, we'll talk about them, but they are not used that much. Okay, so fine. So after that, you see, I'll write another print statement. I'll write Python is cool, right? Something of that sort. Let me execute it. Let's see what happens. So we can see by default the next print statement gets on the next line. So let's try and see whether we can change this behavior or not. So we have seen the end argument. So I'll just put a space in here, or maybe multiple spaces. Let's execute it. Now we can see that this time the next print statement didn't go to a new line. Why? Because by default the end character symbolizes the character that will be appended to the end of the print statement, right? So by default it is a new line. By default it is a new line character. After printing this entire statement, that is hello pound 2 pound 10, after that a new line character will be added, and because of that this statement Python is cool will be printed to the next line. But we have changed the behavior by passing a space in it. Now I can also put on some other character. Imagine I'm gonna put 2% modulo operators, and if I execute it, we can see the behavior. They are getting appended, right? So these two arguments using sep, that means separator, and end character, we can manipulate how our print statement looks. Does it make sense? Other than that, we have some file characters also. Because Python's print function is very much versatile, we can use it on file also, that is entering the data into a file. So when we will talk about files, file handling, we'll talk about in detail, right? So by default it is sysout, sys.std out. Your standard output device is your monitor. So whatever we write, right, whatever print statement we are doing, it is getting displayed to our monitor, right? Because we are using the standard output, that is our monitor, right? And the flush is, again, it's related to file handling, where we want to close our stream and clear the buffer once we have done it, right? So the description of the different arguments are given in the blog. Go through them. And also we have a good deal of examples also which can be used. Does it make sense? Okay, fine. Now the next thing that we are going to discuss is a string format function. At certain times you want to make your print statement better and more easier to handle, right? So imagine if I write something of that sort. Print I'll declare some variables so that it makes more sense. So x is equal to 20, y is equal to maybe 30. I could have declared it one single line, but just for the sake, so I can write the value of x. I can write it in this format also. Is maybe x, and I cannot do that, right? It's an operator. All right, and the value of y is maybe y. Yes, and we can execute it and see the behavior, right? So 20 and 30. So at certain times it becomes really complicated to separate, you see, multiple number of string statements and then variables by comma and everything. It becomes very fuzzy. So we can use the string format function to get the similar kind of a result. So we'll do that. Within the string we'll write the value of x is. Now the value of x will be replaced somewhere using the format function. So we'll put some curl brackets in here, and the value of y is, again, curl bracket, right? So understand this curl bracket symbolizes placeholders, right? And after that we'll write dot format, and within this format we will pass the value that has to be replaced in x and y. So x comma y, and if we execute it, you can see the similar kind of a behavior. The only thing is that these statements look way neat and clean and less complicated than this one, where you are embedding the values inside the nesting within the string statements and everything. So it doesn't make sense. So comparatively, using a format function where you are separating your you see the prompt, your string and your values separately, it's always a better idea other than just nesting it, right? So this was all about input and output in Python, right? So visit the blog. Thanks for watching the video.